We're going to talk about now, as you hinted at this very briefly, is like the biblical argument against divine simplicity. So why do you think, Ryan, from like a biblical perspective, divine simplicity shouldn't be like a preferred theory in terms of like models of God and such?
Yeah, so I think when we look at the explicit teachings of Scripture, what we see is, I think, something that completely contradicts the entire classical understanding of God as timeless, immutable, impassible, and simple. And so here's an example. So the Bible, like, consistently and persistently describes God as temporal, mutable, passable, and as having accidental properties. And so it describes God as having potential and a multitude of actions. And it describes God as standing in real covenantal relations of like give and take or call and response. And it describes God as acquiring new obligations as he enters into those covenantal relationships because he's making promises that he did not previously make and did not have to make. And so the Bible consistently describes God as literally being moved by creatures to feel happiness, sadness, or anger. And it describes God as literally having compassion and empathy, and all of which completely contradicts the classical understanding of God. But I want to focus just on the claim about accidental properties. So earlier I mentioned John Duns Scotus, and so Scotus says accidental properties are repugnant to the simple God. But I think things are very different when you reflect on the way Scripture talks about God. So Scripture consistently reveals God as having accidental properties, and that God even thinks that these are crucial to his narrative identity. And so a really great example of this comes from Exodus 3:13. And so this is the burning bush story, where Moses is talking to God through the burning bush. And so when Moses is doing that, Moses says to God, he's like, "Who shall I say sent me?" And God tells him, "Say that I am sent me. I am who I am." But most biblical scholars like Walter Brueggemann or Terence Fretheim, they'll say that this is like better translated as "I will be who I will be." And so this is a tensed and a temporal description of God. And so as Henry Blosher points out, this is a God with a future. And so it's portraying God as having a future and as having actions that God has not yet performed. And that implies unactualized potential. So God's basically saying, like, if you want to know who I am, just wait and watch what I'm about to do, because that's who I am. But notice what God says immediately after in verses 15 and 16. God tells Moses, "Tell them that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob sent you. That is my name forever." And so those are accidental properties. And God says this actually twice to Moses. He says, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And so as Blosher and other biblical scholars point out, like, this is a God with a contingent history. And so what we have here in Exodus 3 is God not only describing himself in temporal terms, but we also have God describing himself in terms of accidental contingent properties. So God takes these accidental properties to be so important that he declares twice that this is his name forever. And so divine simplicity says that this is repugnant, but Exodus seems to be saying, no, this is absolutely glorious. And so I think we've got a direct contradiction here in the biblical text.